Hi, my name is Dr. Ruth Walker. I'm an assistant professor here at the University of Tennessee at Chattanooga, and it is my great pleasure to introduce our first speakers for our Qualitative Methods Speaker Series. Our first speaker is the soon-to-be Dr. Katelyn Hancock. She's currently finishing up her PhD in Criminal Justice and Criminology at Georgia State University. She'll be graduating in May of 2022. She completed a master's degree in criminal justice here at UTC in 2019. Her research focuses on the victimization of diverse groups and polyvictimization or recurring victimization. Her research utilizes both advanced quantitative methods as well as qualitative content analysis. Our second speaker is Dr. Tammy Garland. She is currently a professor of criminal justice in the UTC Department of Social, Cultural, and Justice Studies. She completed her PhD at Sam Houston State University, and her current research interests include popular culture and crime, juvenile bullying, drug policy issues, and the victimization of women, children, and the homeless. Both of our speakers are going to walk us through a recent content analysis that they conducted that was published in the Journal of Criminal Justice and Popular Culture. The title of the article is Abusive Beats, Intimate Partner Violence in Music Lyrics. They have also very generously agreed to tell us more about an additional content analysis that they are conducting with the Breaking Bad television series.
So you guys got the introduction about us. Our article that you read is Abusive Beats and Intimate Partner Violence in Music Lyrics. We have a lot of fun trying to make play on words with titles. So that was kind of where we went with that title. Beats as in song lyrics, but also as in intimate partner violence. So the objectives for today, we want to show you how to understand what content analysis is and when to use this method in research. And we want you to understand how to practically collect and analyze data using this method, identify themes and myths in the provided song within the lecture, a little kind of small activity, and then understand how you can incorporate numerical coding into content analysis. So what is content analysis? You guys may have already talked about this a little bit, but content analysis is basically a research tool used to determine the presence of certain words, themes, or concepts within some given qualitative data. And using content analysis, researchers can quantify and analyze the presence, meanings, and relationships of such certain words, themes, or concepts. So it's a really versatile way of doing research. And you can analyze a variety of qualitative items. So you could do text like news articles, you could do things in film or TV shows, you can analyze songs like we did, you could do music videos instead of just the song lyrics. You could analyze posts on social media. So you could do a full study on collecting posts that people had made on social media, whether it be Twitter or a Facebook group or some other form of media. And you can also use it to code through interviews to look for themes. So maybe you did interviews and then you had a script from those interviews. You could look for themes within that and kind of code out different things that you wanted to study. And it just allows researchers to examine patterns in a systematic and replicable manner. Dr. Garland, is there anything you want to add?
You've defined it great. Content analysis is great, especially in COVID, y'all. Okay, because guess what? We've had a hard time being able to access human subjects. You don't have to go through IRB with content analysis. It is a quick way. Well, sometimes it's quick. Sometimes it takes a very long time, depending upon your sample size. But it's a very quick way to be able to get access to data when you don't have a lot of funds, if you don't have a lot of time, or if you've been shut down by COVID protocols. So,
all right. And going off of that, when should we use content analysis? So you can use content analysis pretty much any way that you want, anytime. It's super fun. It's a great way to analyze fun mediums. So that social media or your favorite TV show, you could do a content analysis of your favorite TV show. Dr. Garland's done content analysis relating to comic books. I saw other content analysis related to comic characters, so the Joker and Harley Quinn's relationship and things like that. You can use this method when you want to identify patterns or concepts or themes in different mediums. You can use it when you want to make inferences about that medium that you want to study. When you want to perform an unobtrusive study, so kind of like what Dr. Garland was saying with not having to go into IRB, you can use it as an unobtrusive method. So I guess you could kind of look at it as internet sleuthing if you wanted to, just kind of sifting through what they've posted or things like that, or just watching TV and using a code sheet to contact. That way you're not really implementing yourself in these people's lives. You're just taking a step back and kind of gathering the data at afar. And you can use content analysis to quantify the presence of certain concepts. So I'm going to talk about that a little bit in a minute, a mixed methods approach to content analysis. And you can use it to explore understudied areas of interest to you. In my qualitative methods course here at GSU, actually, there was a student who was really interested in graffiti. So he used content analysis in a way that he could like research about graffiti and then also use his own work with graffiti to explore a qualitative way to talk about how graffiti shows up in the streets of Atlanta. And he goes out and gets his own photos of graffiti on walls and whatnot, and he shares those as well. So he had a great time doing that. So it provides a great way if there's maybe not a lot of literature in an area that you want to research and you don't really know what to do with it. It's even good to just start off with the content analysis, exploring things that you're interested in that maybe not a lot of other people are interested in, and you can kind of bridge that gap and do it in a unique way.
One of the great things about content analysis is it's fun, y'all. That is something that we can't highlight enough. Research should be fun. How many of you hate research? Anybody hate research? Good. See, nobody's raising their hand. I love research. Research is the highlight of my day. Now, I will say I don't necessarily like writing it up, but I get all giddy when I find things. I'm like a giddy schoolgirl when I start analyzing data and start looking at themes and themes come up. It's really fun. Katelyn told you I am a comic book nerd. I love comic books. Anybody like comic books in here? Nobody reads comic books. Oh, it hurts. I love comic books. And when you start looking at, and I love Batman themed comic books. So when you start looking at the Joker and Harley Quinn's relationship, this project that we wrote here was actually stemmed from an article that we did on comic books and domestic violence in comic books and looking at these relationships, which actually stemmed from an article that we wrote on sexual assault in comic books. So it's amazing where the literature and the research will take you once you start getting into it, because you start seeing all these themes that you wouldn't normally see when you're looking at them. So I do a lot of comic books, I do music, I do television shows. I'm actually hopeful, please, if all goes well over fall break, I will finally get out this piece I've been working on forever over Stranger Things. I mean, what Stranger Things? Okay, we did an analysis on Stranger Things. So hopefully we will get those out. So remember, research isn't always boring and something you're not forced into. Always go into areas that interest you, and you can always find something to research. And it doesn't just have to be like comic books. It can also be policies. I love policy. I love policy analysis. You can do content analysis with poly analysis, all kinds of different policy analysis, not poly analysis. So remember, when you're doing this, you have to base it in the literature, but also remember it should be what you're interested in.
And moving into our study, this is something that Dr. Garland and I are both interested in. So this is kind of a background on our Abusive Beats article and how we collected and analyzed the data for it, because you guys have read the article. So we're going to talk about the methods a little bit. The time period for song inclusion. So usually in content analysis, you may want to limit the time frame in which you're collecting data. So whether that be from post online You may want to be like, I'm going to start collecting data in August from this group online, and then I'm going to quit in December. Or for something like this, you may decide that you only want music from 2000 to 2019. Or maybe you want to look at only seasons 1 through 3 of your favorite TV show, or something like that. So you set kind of a time frame for how you want to do that. That way it adds a systematic feature, and it's not just all over the place. You have some kind of guidelines that you're going by. So for our study, we selected 2000 to 2019 based on the social climate and the violence against women area that was going on. And we examined those for manifest and latent content. Manifest is content that's physically present and countable. So maybe that would be mentions directly of abuse or a black eye or something like that. Whereas latent is kind of, you're interpreting what the symbolism is in that area, whether it be interpreting that in a song lyric or kind of like a metaphor for something, or whether you're looking at a picture and you're kind of interpreting it from that, or maybe you're watching a video and there's symbolism within that video. That would kind of be latent content. And a lot of researchers may view latent content as being subjective, because sometimes it may be subjective to the researcher as to how they interpret something. And then within those songs that we had selected, we identify variables of interest to be coded from the songs. So that ranged from genre, perspective of the song, and offender or victim sex, abuse type, whether or not the victim fought back, presence of substances, presence of children, and then the outcome for the victim. So whether they stayed or left or something else. And in this method as well, researchers can choose themes or variables they would like to examine prior to beginning data collection, or they can kind of look at the data that they have and identify themes from that data and decide to focus more on those if they don't have really a set choice in mind. And then we use a purposive sampling technique, and we had 59 songs. Songs were found by searching internet lists, wikis, blogs, and listservs. And Dr. Garland, do you want to talk about that a bit more?
Yes. Okay. So when you're doing this, a lot of times you take an inductive approach. You already know something about what you're looking for. So we were able to go in, and you can do all kinds of, if you type in domestic violence and song lyrics, there are websites that list the top such and such song lyrics, but you have to be careful, okay? It's important to have inclusion criteria, but it's also equally important to have exclusion criteria. And one of the things that we found was when you type in domestic violence, we're really talking about intimate partner violence. We're not looking at child abuse. We're not looking at certain factors. So we had to go through, and a lot of times what you have to do is eliminate things. So we were eliminating anything that was before 2000. Okay, and there are a lot of songs that we hold dear that talk about domestic violence or even specifically intimate partner violence, but those were not in our criteria, and so we had to eliminate those. We also eliminated. You have to look at the difference in genre. So we were able through Statistica, okay, to identify the top genres. Well, we wanted to basically kick out, okay, anything that wasn't in those major genres. Latin and K-pop, extremely popular, but not necessarily in the US. And we eliminated jazz and Christian. We also were eliminating kind of that mainstream, okay? And so you can find a lot of listservs, and I did a lot of combing, and I had other students combing, some of our other co-authors combing through these, and it was, I mean, sometimes Katelyn, I'll send emails in the middle of the night, because this is what I do when I don't sleep. So I send emails in the middle of the night, and I'm talking about this, but sometimes some things we do have to eliminate. Some of my, Crazy in Love is one of those. There's a reference about basically hitting somebody, but that's not really the focus of the song, and it's not this intimate partner violent relationships. So we had to kick some of these to the curb. Like everybody knows Roar and everybody loves the song Roar, but guess what? We had to eliminate that because it's an anthem. It's really not about domestic violence or intimate partner violence. And then one of the big issues when doing this, when they have those lists, those wikis, those blogs, they talk about all these songs. No More Drama isn't really about intimate partner violence. And so there's images in videos oftentimes that the video is about intimate partner violence, but the song really isn't. That was just the director's take on it. So we had to eliminate those as well, because we're doing song lyrics, we're not doing the videos. Now, if you all wanted to do videos, you could take this and look at all the videos, because there's some literature that's done it, but not everyone has done it, and to the level that they probably should have. They'll take snippets of videos. They'll take like 3 and analyze those, and that's I don't really consider that necessarily content analysis. I want more in depth and looking at a breadth of issues. But so it's a lot of combing. When you look at these internet lists, these wikis, these blogs, it's a lot of combing. It's sheer dumb luck. It is a purposive sample, which is just a little bit higher above a convenience sample. So we found what we could. We knew what we were looking for. We had our exclusion criteria, but there could be things that we might have missed. So hopefully we didn't, but that is the nature of doing research like this.
And like Dr. Garland said, we did have our own inclusion and exclusion criteria. And for whatever you want to study or however you want to set up your study, you can always make your own inclusion and exclusion criteria, because everything, for example, similar to, I did a meta-analysis on polyvictimization in my meta-analysis course. And looking at that, I selected only studies that looked at adult polyvictimization, or only studies that were quantitative rather than qualitative, or only studies that looked at, for that specific one, I was looking at depression as an outcome. So only studies that looked at depression rather than a wide range of other mental health issues that you could have related to polyvictimization. So depending on what you want to do, you would set your own inclusion and exclusion criteria to kind of go in your methods. And then that goes back to making content analysis systematic. Like, it provides a roadmap to other researchers who, if they wanted to come back and do the study that you did, they could follow the inclusion and exclusion criteria that you put forth, the time frame that you put forth in your data, and they could find almost identical the same thing or something similar, depending on how subjective some things might be. So I wanted to show you guys the songs, our sampled songs. I think you should have been able to see this table in the article as well, but there's probably some on here that you guys are familiar with, I'm guessing. Tell me, when you hear these songs, do you think about the intimate partner violence that's in them? Do you think, oh my gosh, that's terrible, why would anybody say something like that? Or is it just singing a lyric and being like, this is my jam? Okay, so I'm going to get into how we coded some things. We took an inductive approach to receive variables for the analysis. Songs with questionable outcomes were verified with information sites, as we said. And sometimes the ambiguity within song lyrics were assessed with Iterator Reliability. And what Iterator Reliability is, say that you were, I did actually an audit for Atlanta Police Department this past summer for their body cameras. And we assessed Iterator Reliability through, like, one of us watched the same video, and then we filled out the coding sheet, and then we compared our answers. And then if there were any discrepancies, we would discuss why one of us chose this versus why one of us chose this. And you can do the same thing. That's what we did with the same thing with the song lyrics. So listen to the song, look at the lyrics, have our codes, compare them. If they match, great. If they don't, we look at what didn't match, and then we discuss why it didn't match. And then we say what we're going to do to fix that moving forward. That way you have established Iterator Reliability, and you can add another component to making your analysis systematic.
Now, you can either do this informally or formally. I put informally. With 59 cases, you can do this informally. You can talk about, you can sit and say, as you're looking through the data, I don't think that's right. But when you've got 1,000 cases, it's not so easy to do. So you can do more formal, which basically you'll just run reliability analysis on the two, and basically you'll get an alpha, and that will determine reliability or not. So when you see those alphas and you look at reliability on those scales, that's what that's often what that's meaning. But usually if I have 59 cases and we're coding, I can go to the person and say, that's not right. That's not what I found, and talk it through. But if you have a lot of cases, do a more formal process.
And then within the analysis as well, just other than just doing like percentages like we did, we also used the different lyrics. So qualitative analysis of the myths to identify themes and explanations. So I think you'll probably have noticed in the article how we put a quote from one of the songs, and then we explain the themes that were happening in that song. And then we have our results section kind of divided up by themes. That way it makes it easy for the reader to be able to understand what is going on, what we found, and how that relates specifically to examples within our songs. So the lyrics within the songs that we identified. So for these, I have gave just a little bit about the coding, how we coded our data, and you can code your data however you want. Whenever you get it and put it into everything, you can decide what numerical identification you want to add to your variable. You can decide what you want to name it. You can decide what categories you want to have and things like that when you're thinking about a code book to design for that. One of my favorite quotes actually from this paper, and I've talked to Dr. Garland about it before, Earl may have had to die, but women who kill their abusive spouses rarely remain unpunished by the criminal justice system. That is a great way to relate your interest in this song back to the justice system at large. So it's a great way to illustrate problems with the system. And I just wanted to highlight that. So this was a table of our results, and they're often presented by main themes rather than explaining complicated models and tables. Our results were presented in sections based on music genre and race. And then we used 4 main themes to discuss things. So general IPV myths, myths about victims, myths about perpetrators, and intimate partner homicide. And then you can use quotes or images. So if you were doing a content analysis with images, you could put pictures in where we have quotes if you wanted to do that. And then here you can see that the largest genre that we had was actually rock. Most of the song's perspectives were from the point of view of the victim. The large majority of the songs were from a male offender victim perspective. The most frequent type of abuse was physical, which is oftentimes expected with these songs and more easy to identify. And then the victim outcome is kind of interesting. So most of the victims actually stayed or returned in the relationship, which often models real life as well, which is neat that you can compare things in something like this, like a song analysis, to things that are happening in the real world. Dr. Garland, did you want to add something here?
Oh, I'll tell you. Yes, when you're looking at reality, and this is a lot of times what I do a lot of myth versus reality research. And so when we're looking at myths, oftentimes they're reinforced, but it doesn't work that way. It basically is saying, okay, this is most victims stay, and that is the reality. I do love the not love, but where the victim kills the perp. In 7 of the songs, 11.9%, the victim kills the perpetrator. And this is where we got, this is where we pulled that quote from, is that, it's becoming increasingly popular to sing about women taking agency and taking control back of relationships. And it's taken to the extreme in a lot of these songs, because rather than just leaving, she doesn't just leave, she kills him. Okay. And so what happens is it kind of is creating that idea that, okay, if he hits you, you can kill him. But we know that's not what happens. We know that when women kill their offenders, it's not the burning bed. It isn't Farrah Fawcett, getting off because she killed her abusive husband. She's typically going to prison. So this is one of those really interesting things that we found in this article.
I had a question about how you had presented your results. So I thought it was interesting because you don't always see in a results section when you're talking about the themes bringing in previous literature. I really liked the way that you did that, like who's saying this is what we saw in the song and this does not align with what we know is happening. And so I was wondering is that something common in criminology, or was that, I don't always see results presented like that. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that.
It varies. I like to do that, especially when you're looking at these myths and these reinforcement. I've done this in quite a few papers, because if you're looking at the myth versus the reality, you can't really contextualize things unless you bring in that research and you're talking about what others have found and what the reality is. So yes, it is especially with qualitative, it is a lot more common to do so. Typically when you're doing just a sheer quantitative analysis, it doesn't happen like that. But I also like to do mixed methods too. Probably one of my pet peeves is the fact that people will often do qualitative, but they don't contextualize, and I have no clue kind of what they're talking about. And they'll say, well, we found these themes. Well, if you're just providing a single quote, that doesn't necessarily establish a theme. That's why we think it's so important to use percentages and to determine, well, this was actually happening and this was going on, because a lot of times people don't really understand, and I see it all the time in the literature, they don't understand what a theme is. A theme is not just one instance, a theme or a couple instances. It is a repeated instance of an occurrence. And so when you look at this, it's easier to contextualize when you have those percentages or any other statistic. You can run more advanced statistics if your analysis will allow it, and then provide a quote and the context in which you're discussing it. Melissa has a question on, have you looked at who wrote the song? I was curious if the factor would show the same results. We were looking at who wrote songs, if it was a male or female, because a lot of times they're writing from their own perspective. And so, yes, I mean, it is very, a lot of times when you're doing song lyrics, you have to act, it's typically the singer who is writing anymore, but sometimes you won't get the same, but we were looking at necessarily the artist of the song, but a lot of them are also the writers, and it does influence how it's portrayed. Like Christina Aguilera, she was a victim of abuse, so she's writing about abuse. When you look at Eminem, he has a history of at least emotional abuse towards people. So it's very important to look at context of who's writing songs and who's performing them.
Yeah, I was going to say, you can always refer to your team too. Like if you're looking at something and you're kind of like, well, I don't know, you could discuss that with your team and you guys could decide together whether or not you actually want to include that or not include that.
Brooke says she was interested to see that rap music wasn't the most common for IPV. And that's what we talk about. And if you look at the rap songs we included, there's oftentimes a racist tinge in how we perceive rap and hip hop music. In reality, it's not the most that's portraying. Now, it doesn't mean that rap songs don't sexualize women, because if you look at the sexualization literature, that's a whole different story. But when you're looking at IPV, the main perpetrator was a white male. Okay, Eminem yes, Eminem takes up that category. Yes, you're right, Brooke, and he is it's amazing, but you don't see that as much in rap music, and we would think, from the history of the folk genre, and the Delia's gone, that country was up there, but it wasn't number one. Rock was actually number one, which actually did surprise me.
Now I want to do a little short activity with you guys. So we're going to take gunpowder and lead, and maybe on a sheet of your own paper, take some notes, and then we can shout out some things that we see. So you're going to read gunpowder and lead, these lyrics, and you're going to identify some possible themes that you may see repeated in those lyrics. Or you can pick out some of the variables over here that we already have and note those.
I was excited that Katelyn was having you do this, as for my undergraduate research methods class, we do this same assignment. I pull 5 songs, and then based upon 5 songs, they have to go through and create all these variables. And then I show them the study. So what words are shocking you all?
Overuse of the word gun. Yeah.
Gunpowder, shotgun.
I would say the fact that she called herself crazy, as if that's how he justified it.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that you bring up mental illness in lyrics, and the justification for violence, that is, I don't think that's been done. So somebody might be interested in doing that.
I think this song, having done a song lyric analysis myself, and just like being familiar with how those can look, this one gives you really good imagery that you can grab a hold of. It's not like symbolic. This is like the quotes that everyone has been pulling out, like shook me, pull the trigger, slap my face, fist is bigger, but my fist is big, but gun's bigger. Like it's very concrete. Like you can visualize this even without a music video with just the lyrics itself. And that's not always something you get from song lyrics themselves.
Yeah, I keep being drawn to feel the rumble like a cold black wind. I just think that has great like imagery too.
That line that says, "Don't that sound like a real man?" So, and I'm going to show them what little girls are made of. So like the gender references that they put in there were interesting.
Yeah, and you could even think about what is she considering a real man? Just someone that doesn't abuse people. Okay, I'm gonna move on from this, and then if you have any more questions about the content analysis and end, we're happy to answer those. I was wanting to show you 2 other content analysis projects that I have done, and talk about those a little bit as well for a short time. So I just wanted to be able to illustrate how versatile content analysis is. You can do so many different things with it. You can follow all different types of stuff that you may want to do that otherwise hasn't been done. So in my qualitative methods class, like Dr. Garland was talking about with the ability to do things online, we actually propose studies online rather than going in person and interviewing folks like maybe you normally would do in a qualitative class. So for this study, I propose that I would join a group and take their posts, take notes of their posts and record those, and then look for themes within those. And then in that paper, I would be able to identify specific quotes from those posts that would do different themes. And in this case, my content analysis included a coding tree, which is also something that you can do. So you can make a coding tree and you can have like your main themes. So your overall topic was IPV victim experience. And then I had a theme of rationalization and a theme of consequences. Below rationalization, I did sub themes of staying and leaving. So victims might post and rationalize why they were either going to stay in a relationship or leave that relationship. And then I did a sub-theme of consequences, because IPB can have a wide variety of consequences, some even more so than the ones that I put out. So emotional abuse, emotional issues, physical harm, physical damage to themselves, financial problems. And then after abuse, the consequence is help seeking. So they may look for different forms of help. And then another sub theme within help seeking, I did sharing, justice, and advice. So maybe they were just seeking out advice. So that's another avenue that you could take. That maybe you wanted to analyze something on social media, you could kind of look through posts and identify some themes that you want to look at, and then make a coding tree. And it could be something pretty and just as simple as this. And then you would use quotes to illustrate those themes, just to make sure that the themes that you chose have multiple quotes that would go with each. So it actually is a theme. It's reiterated multiple times within the work that you're trying to do. And then this is near and dear to my heart, Breaking Bad. We did a study on Breaking Bad, and we analyzed seasons 1 through 3, which was 33 episodes. We chose that we were going to look at only 4 characters. So Walter, Skylar, Jesse, and Hank. Breaking Bad, actually, this project came out of Dr. Garland's crime and pop culture class, which doubled as a qualitative analysis course. And I actually hadn't watched Breaking Bad prior to this assignment. I wound up falling in love with Breaking Bad, and I've probably watched it like 3 times now. So that was super cool to do a project on it. We explored 3 main themes revolving around theory. So you guys might want to look at theories that are in social media, that are in songs, that are in a TV show. You could actually apply whatever psychological theory that you're looking at or that you're interested in to these mediums, which is really cool. So in mine, I looked at something called general strain theory. And in it, I wanted to look for the presence of strain, the character's reaction to those strains, and how that strain was perpetuated when the character involved in criminal behavior. And with this project, I did it with one of my peers in that program. We used Iterator Reliability, like we talked about before, to make sure that we maintained objectivity. So she coded season 1, and I coded season 2, and then we came together to make sure that they matched. Or we coded season 1, we both coded season 1, looked to see if it matched, and then I did 2 and she did 3. Set it backwards. And then with these 2, you can put this into SPSS. So the data that we made a code sheet, and then we quantified that with numbers, and then put those variables into SPSS. So made our own spreadsheet of data, our own data file, and named all the variables and things like that. And I'm going to show you the code sheet in a minute. That way it makes more sense and it's easier to explain. And then the themes within that were discussed based on scenes and quotes from the show, kind of like we did with the song lyrics. And this was the title slide for our presentation that we gave at the end of Dr. Garland's class. And I added it because I wanted to show you just how much fun it can be to do content analysis. Like we named it methodology in Breaking Bad because of the obvious reason. They cook meth. So methodology. And then it was a general strain theory analysis, and we were able to use elements from the periodic table and the Breaking Bad logo to make a presentation slide. And that was our title slide. And we even played the music, the theme song, that when it first comes on, when we went to present. So you can do cool things like that and make it really awesome and fun to watch. Okay, and this is the code book that we created. So for each character, this code book over here on the left of the screen that you're looking at, on the right of the screen that you're looking at, for each character, we filled one of these out for each episode. So season 1, episode 1, we filled 4 of these out. 1 for Walter, 1 for Hank, 1 for Skylar, and one for Jesse. And then you use the code sheet to create a data set in SPSS. Each variable on the sheet for each character was its own variable. For example, Walt was V1A through V6. Skylar was V7A through V12. Jesse was V13 through V18A. Hank V19A through V24. And then episodes were treated as cases. So episodes were your data. That was what you were putting in. You were putting in for each variable that you made, putting in the data that came from this code sheet. It's easier to describe like when you have a shell in front of you, like SPSS in front of you, and when you can create those variables. And if you guys ever want to do this and actually have questions about it when you start to input data, I'm happy to help with that, because it took me a while to get my data sheet formulated in the right way that made sense, because we were doing so many different episodes, so many different little code sheets for each character. It gets a little confusing, but happy to provide an email, or you guys can reach out to me anytime you have questions about that, if you ever decide to do something like that. And then we use descriptive statistics just to kind of discuss the theme. So percentages, like how we did with the content analysis. So for Walt, this was how another way to do the content analysis when you're using a show. So you can describe your results in terms of themes as well. So for Walt, his major strains were that he feared losing his family. He feared losing his own life due to cancer or cartel violence. Sorry if I'm spoiling Breaking Bad for you if you haven't watched it. He's also unable to achieve success, which is a major element of the strain theory that I'm talking about. And he was unable to obtain success repeatedly in ways of being financially stable. He was failing at being a husband and father. He failed at being a scientist and was a high school science teacher. And then Jesse, another main character, has someone special to him pass away. He's always unable to make his parents happy. He feels like he can't do anything right. So that's a different kind of strain that he experiences all the time. Skylar, which is Walt's wife, she fears losing her family, financial strain. She's always troubled by Walt's behavior because he's kind of erratic and I think partially losing his mind because of all the things that are happening to him. And then Hank, he has fear and anxiety originating from trauma. So he's a police officer, so he has a lot of on-job trauma. And then he is just so concerned about trying to uncover who the major criminal is, this Heisenberg character, when in reality, it's so-and-so. I really don't want to spoil that for you. I feel like I'm spoiling it, so I'm not going to say that. And then his wife is also a kleptomaniac, so he's dealing with a multitude of strains. And in our analysis, we found that Walt experienced strain 100% of the time. So Walt experienced some form of strain in his life in every single episode. Jesse experienced some form of strain in every single episode. Skylar experienced some form of strain at 73% of the time, and Hank 55% of the time. And most of Hank's is probably low because he wasn't in every single episode. And about almost all of Walt's responses to strain were criminal and or violent. And most of Jesse's were also criminal and violent, but surprisingly, Skylar's weren't criminal or violent. And Hank, when he did respond to strain in a negative way, it usually wasn't criminal, but it was violent. Does anybody have any questions about Breaking Bad and general strain theory, or coding trees, or content analysis of the lyrics, or anything?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Are you able to hear me from here?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, I was wondering, so when you're doing some of these fun content coding analyses, what are the opportunities like for publishing this, whether in books or journals, this type of analysis?
There are all kinds of publication
Yeah.
venues. That's what I do. I'm tenured anymore, so I do research that fills my cup, and I would encourage you. You can't always do that because sometimes you have to do what your major professor, especially when you're in a doctoral program, they're doing. But I do things that fill my cup, so I publish all the time. I publish in Journal of Crime and Pop Culture, which it was here, but I also publish in things that are more mainstream, like feminist criminology, which because I'm writing on gender. So you can do more pop culture journals, and there is a psychology and pop culture journal out there. But you can also, those ones tailored towards pop culture, but then you can also publish in mainstream journals. And then you can also write for publish in textbooks, not textbooks, books. I've got a couple book chapters coming out that are out. I just haven't received those books yet. One is on Breaking Bad, and it was the foundation for this. And then Katelyn and I will hopefully take care of this and finish it up this summer. That's the plan. But yes, there are all kinds. And if you're working on something, I'm just upstairs. So if you have a question, come talk to me.
Dr. Garland, you have more experience with it than
I
me.
didn't hear her.
Oh, she was asking about the differences between content analysis and thematic analysis.
Thematic is when you're just kind of looking at those themes. Content analysis allows you to do more. It's pretty much the same thing, I will tell you. But if when you're just establishing themes, it's usually more qualitative in nature. When you're doing a content analysis, it can actually be quantitative and quantitative, or quantitative and qualitative. I typically use a mixed methods approach. A lot of people don't. But you don't necessarily have to, with content analysis, establish actual themes. You can do counts, you can do various types of research. So thematic analysis is one type of analysis that can be used in content analysis.
So like their initial table of results with all those counts that you read in the article, that could have been it. They didn't necessarily have to do that extra step to come up with additional themes. But sometimes the themes in that are also brought into content analysis.
It's just they're both just really flexible methods to doing research. And I mean, as long as you document well what you did do and your own process, it's going to be really good. And it's going to be, it's going to add that systematic component that a lot of qualitative work gets knocked off for, because it doesn't compare to quantitative in this way, what people say. So just make sure that you're systematic about the things that you do, and take notes when you're doing these things, and like looking for, whether you're looking for themes or whether you're checking with your teammate to see if they coded the same thing, or whether or not you're wanting to look for certain variables or look at certain things or set a time frame. Just be systematic in that and take notes on that, and make sure that that's reflected in your methods section of your paper.
And don't be afraid to look at what other people have done and how they do it. That is the one thing. Keep your own notes. Obviously, you're not going to plagiarize because it's not the same study, but you will get ideas. The more research you read, the more ideas you will get about how to write up this inclusion, exclusion criteria. All of these things matter. And I know sometimes you get tired of reading all these articles, but I swear it is beneficial in the end. Don't skip over the methods and just read the conclusion.
Okay, well, I will be completely honest, even with Dr. Garland in the room. When I first started doing this, I was very confused and pretty upset, honestly, because our coding sheets, like I said, we did one for every character. So that was 4 of these for the 4 characters that I mentioned for every single episode. So for 33 episodes, there was a lot of me watching an episode, pausing the episode, going back, watching the episode, moving on, pausing, going back, because you just miss so many things when you're trying to code all these things when it's happening and you're watching it and you actually like the show. So you're like kind of getting invested in it and then forgetting that you're working. You kind of have to go back and forth a lot, and it takes a lot of time. I didn't really quantify, I guess, the time in my head. But as a graduate student, I just kind of was already used to how much work it is to be a graduate student. So that kind of just, I went with it, sat in with me, I guess. And honestly, doing something like this, it's enjoyable because I liked the show. Like trying to code everything did get frustrating sometimes, but I enjoyed the work, so it wasn't miserable.
It can get daunting. I mean, it does get daunting. I did one article, and we did the first season of, I think, 6 series, and they had about 10, it ended up being 600 and something cases, or that we coded. And it was daunting, but see what Katelyn, I probably didn't tell her she could do is you watch it and then you pray to God that there's transcripts on the actual episodes. That way you know what you're looking for and you don't have to sit and write verbatim the actual, you want the quote, and hopefully you can find those quotes in the transcripts and that they exist, because it makes life much easier. So yes, it is daunting, and Kayla, she's gonna kill me now.
No, I didn't know about the transcripts, but I did want to mention that too. Like on the coding sheet, along with me circling and like quantifying everything the way that I did, that part made it easy. But then I was also on these code sheets. There was I didn't put it on the slide, but there was a part at the bottom of the sheet where I could write out quotes specific to that episode and that situation that the character had said. That way it made the paper more interesting when you're reading it. Like, I can't remember, there was a famous one from Walt, and I can't remember what it is off the top of my head right now. It was when he was talking about morphing into Heisenberg. He was like, I am the bad, I am the something, I can't remember, but it's a great quote, and they had a lot of great quotes. Yeah.
I have a code sheet right here of stuff I'm working on, because I work on like 50 projects at the same time. But everything is, you'll have a question, did it happen? And it's explain. So you can explain what happened. If there's a great quote, you pull those quotes, and that's what, if you want a quote, that's where those transcripts really help out. You just verify that you get the quote, you write it down as fast as possible, and then verify it. But it is, I mean, it is a lot of work. But yes, the more you write on your notes and on your code sheet, the better off you're going to be, because when you start doing these analyses, and song analyses are great because you can pull up all the songs and now you just print them off now, and so they are great for that. But it doesn't necessarily work when you're doing television shows, because you do have to go through and actually pull quotes or films or whatever. Yes, it's a lot.
And I did want to reiterate too that your code sheets are they're going to be designed, they can look like this, but they're going to be unique to you and unique to your project. So like when you get your topic, you get your idea of what you want to do, then you're going to design a code sheet that will help you get to that point, that will help you get to what you're wanting to study. You're going to have the code sheet be about variables that you're interested in the research. So that's going to be unique, and there's not like a one size approach fits all to that as well. So, and my advice from my perspective would be to first kind of look at some content analysis that have been done. Like if you're interested in like media stuff and content analysis, just kind of look around on Google Scholar for some stuff. Or if you're interested in like what we did in intimate partner violence in some form of media, or whatever your niche is, look for that, and then look for content analysis and just kind of see what's been done, kind of see like what their methods were or something like that. That way you just have an idea in your head, and then think about what you want to look at or what you're most interested in. Like I'm sure everybody sitting in that room right now has something on the top of their head that they're like, oh wow, that would be really cool. Even if you're not super into research, or maybe you have a favorite show that you're into and you're like, well, I bet this could be connected back to something within my psychology program or something like that. I'm sure everybody has something like that. And if you want to do that, pitch it to a faculty member and get a faculty member to help you with your research. I'm sure anyone there would love to do work with students and do something fun. So that's my advice.